So it's a great honor and no less a great pleasure for me to introduce to you Professor Arlie Hochschild from University of California, Berkeley. Professor Hochschild is one of the most renowned sociologists in America, say. Her main work focuses on sociologies of emotion and emotional labor. They have won many awards. Simply listing her honorary doctorates would go beyond the scope of this short introduction. In her latest book, she addresses a topic with enormous explosive power, especially with regard to the social cohesion of US society, the alt-right movement. I think that the media reports around the US presidential election last week made it possible to empirically experience the disintegration of the US society. If you look at the significant spatial distribution of votes between Democrats and Republicans alone, the concise term urban-rural divide is still a very mild one. Obviously, worlds collide here. The so-called flyover states in the geographical center of the country appear predominantly red, with a few blue spots where big cities are located, while the coasts appear deep blue. There is much more to the color scheme than a simple party preference. Arlie Hochschild has set herself the task of deciphering the worlds behind these colors. Her last book, Strangers in Their Own Land, Anger and Mourning and the American Right, deals with the extreme edge of the red center, the deep south, and the people here who see themselves as losers of the American dream, indeed as losers of the neoliberal system. In 5 years, she has made many conversations with these people in Louisiana to understand why these groups despise the state and its institutions and find their political home in right-wing populism. The book was awarded as one of the 10 best non-fiction books of the decade by the Boston Public Library. It was listed as notable social science book of the year by the New York Times Book Review and has so far been translated into 7 languages, including German and Japanese. In her talk today, she will draw on this material from her field research among Donald Trump's most loyal supporters, parts of the blue-collar workers of the Deep South, to understand the alienation of large populations from political institutions. Here lies a significant threat to social cohesion. This is fed by the neoliberal economic order with its outsourcing of labor and focus on returns without social correctives. This is precisely where Trumpism comes in as a populist revolt, as Arlie Hochschild suspects. After our presentation today, we will have the opportunity for a short discussion, like always. I would like to ask you to use the chat function and give me a short hint if you would like to ask the question to Arlie Hochschild. So, dear Arlie Hochschild, we are very much looking forward to your lecture, and the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pierre, and I'm delighted to be here among all my birds of a feather as we try to understand what's happening. In the short period I have, because I'm eager for our discussion, I'd like to address 3 things. The first is, how serious is this rupture? And the second is, what's causing it? And the third is what we can do about it. So, how serious is this? A Pew study of Americans asked them, do you think the difference between Republicans and Democrats is just a matter of policies, or do you think actually the rupture has to do with basic values? 85% of Americans said, no, this is serious. This is cuts deep. This is basic values. And it's not just values. Again, another Pew study says it's facts. And certainly this fits my 5 years of immersion in southern Louisiana. I'm now doing research in Appalachia. And again, you feel yourself entering a different reality, a different factual world, which is, of course, reinforced time and time again with Fox News and talking to neighbors. You believe what you see, and you see your neighbors, and they too are living in a different reality. So this is not a superficial thing. It goes deep. It's values, it's facts, and it's experientially troubling to the people that I'm talking to. I interviewed a man who lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and high school educated, blue collar, white, in his early 40s. And he said, I can't put things together. It's like life has 3 screens and I don't know which is real. One screen, my wife and I get in the car, we go to Meadow Downs, which is where the Kentucky Derby has a horse race. And we get out of the car and we see there are these Humvees, and men with ammunition are getting out of these Humvees, and they look prepared for war. Nothing happened. There was no violence, but we got back in the car and went back home. So that's screen 1. He said screen 2 is I look at Facebook, and it's the empathy wars. I mean, people are disparaging each other and canceling each other. Compared to 10 years ago, it's troubling to him. And then there's a third screen. He said, then I get in the car and I go to the grocery store, and people are polite and they say, how's your day? And they wait in line, and normal civility is unripped. So he said, that's the world I think I'm living in, but what about these other 2 worlds? So I think it's that's the experience of a number of people. Now, he ran into the display of people prepared to fight because Louisville was the site of the death of Breonna Taylor, and there had been a lot of Black Lives Matter protests there. But I think it doesn't by much exaggerate the degree to which this is troubling. However, on the scale of seriousness, I don't think that this is the 1850s leading up to a civil war. I would compare it more to the 1920s, where there was anti-immigrant and anti-red hysteria, but it didn't lead to war. And I think that, so it's that serious, but this rupture is simultaneous with a kind of worldwide movement of right-wing populisms. It's simultaneous with a climate change and climate migrations that lead to immigration flows. It's simultaneous with a pandemic. So all of this heightens our anxiety and makes it more serious. So I don't think we're on the verge of war. On the other hand, this is not to be minimized. It is. And what is the it? We're talking about social cohesion here, which is a wonderfully important, resonant point of focus. I think we're in the middle of what I might characterize as empathy wars. as I go around talking to people, I like to think about who they do and don't empathize with, where they feel, well, that's a different kind of person, not like me. And when an empathy norm, it's kind of a war of feeling rules. Who should you feel affiliated with, and who should you disaffiliate from? That's what I think I would invite you to see it through that lens. And so what's serious, when I say something serious, it's that you would fully not empathize with a person, you would fully dehumanize the person. It's serious in that regard. Okay, so why is this happening? I think I'd like to back up from the field here and try and take a broad brush stroke picture. I'm not sure what I'm going to say, but it's the best explanation that makes sense to me at the moment. I think that we have to go back to the 1970s and look at the economic picture and see that globalization really changed the political power structure. It gave power to large companies that could simply pick up shop and offshore. And in a way, it made companies more powerful, and paradoxically, it made governments less powerful. So when the right wing is saying, oh, big bad government, as if government is all powerful, actually, I think in the 70s, what happened is that actually governments lost control and of these companies that hopped around the world in search of cheap labor and began petitioning these companies, oh, please invest here and not there. That happens in the globe, and it happens among American states. I saw that in Louisiana, giving a $2.5 billion kind of giveaway. Please don't put down your oil facility in Houston, Texas. Do it here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Big giveaways, impoverishing the population. So as companies got more powerful, governments, began to tax them less. And it led to winners and losers. And the winners were on the coasts. They were generally in these global cities, generally educated. And I'm near one here with Silicon Valley. And those were the winners of this trend. And the losers were where you see the red states. They are Rust Belts states. They are sundown, small towns. They are rural areas. And I believe that the rise of the right is really led by the elite of the left behind, the elite of the losing sector. So these people that I came to know were not the abject poor, nor were they rich, but they were in a sector that was declining, but they were doing pretty okay. They were the lower middle class and upper reaches of the blue collar class. And the theme that they felt keenly and strongly was loss. You don't see that in the demonstrations. Everybody looks confident wearing red hat, but there was a tremendous sense of loss. I interviewed a guy Eastern Kentucky recently. I'm doing all this by Zoom now. And he said, when Cole left the area, it was like the whole town was in mourning. The whole town was in mourning. And that struck me, that whole town mourns. So these are the people who are really responding with such force to Donald Trump. But it's tempting, of course, to focus on the character of the guy with orange hair who insults everyone and forces his way. But that's like focusing on an avalanche and not noticing that the temperature of the snow has risen. And so what I'm saying here to sketch out a reason for this rupture is to look at something analogous to the temperature of the snow. It is to look at the division of winners and losers from of globalization, and look at the effort of the losers to regain what they experience as lost territory, loss. Now, let me just say one more thing. Another interview recently, again in Kentucky, and the man I'm speaking of was a mayor of a tiny town. And he said, it used to be that if you get a coal job, if you were a man, white, blue collar man, you could get a high paid coal job, $60,000, $70,000. But that always went up and down. Always, now there are jobs, now there aren't. Now there are jobs, now there aren't. But it used to be that when jobs were down in this small holler in Eastern Kentucky, all Republican now, that you could go to Detroit. So you can't get a job as a coal miner, you go to Detroit and get a job in a manufacturing company. But that's gone too. So both your primary job and your fallback job aren't available to you. So there is in this area a kind of an economic depression and many diseases of despair. This is a place where a lot of drug addiction, suicide are also common. So I guess the other part of the story here to explain why is that the Democratic Party had relied on labor unions to connect it to average Joe in small towns and rural areas. And those labor unions have receded in power and almost disappeared from the scene. And the Democratic Party therefore lost its connection to people and seemed to serve the powers of the cosmopolitan elite. This is argued by Thomas Frank very forcefully in Listen Liberal. I think he's right. So that would give you the overall kind of macro picture as to why I think we're at this crisis point. I think we have to also look at the media, which itself has become highly politicized and which kind of heats up this empathy war. And people, in their anxiety for about all the issues that face their life, they go to the mass media for some information and comfort. And many people actually became somewhat addicted to Fox News. I would ask people, what do you watch? Oh, in the morning, I put on a Fox News just to see what's happening. And then in the afternoon, I interviewed a woman who had a little television right by her computer, and she watched that in the evening. She had a drink with her husband, and she watched it then. And then she began to see the commentators as like members of a family. Bill O'Reilly was like daddy, and then, there was the sassy sister, and Hannity was the cranky uncle. She kind of familized who she was watching, and this reaffirmed her position in this empathy standoff. So, so the people I'm now talking with, and actually, I have two sources of information. One, I'm still in touch with my Louisiana people, and now I've got these others in Kentucky. Feel this is deeply serious, and it cuts through how they feel about COVID. For example, should you wear a mask? They think you shouldn't. It's brave not to. And maybe coronavirus is a hoax. As I say, they live in a different truth. And others think they're, of course, idiots. It's a matter of science. And so let me just end here then with what it is we can do if it has the character that I'm finding it does. What can we do? Well, a lot of things. I think that social cohesion is ultimately a matter of human agency, both at the collective level and individual level. And it's not hard to cross the empathy bridge. So I guess what I think can happen is that when President Biden, once his legitimacy is settled, could really initiate a common ground program. I would even give it a cabinet level position that goes out and does a kind of a reach out across regions. So at that level, I think we also need to heroize, I'm speaking normatively, what I think should happen. We can heroize people like OAC, the Octavio Cortez got together with Fred Cruz, these are super left and super right, on a bill to, it was anti-corruption, things like that. You can lift up examples of mediation and cooperation. And then as a long-term goal, I think our country, given the history I've just described, needs new mechanisms that weave our society. We used to have labor unions. We used to have the compulsory draft that took people from different regions and different social classes and different races and wove them. Now we don't have those, and we need to rebuild those. And there is something called the Bridge Alliance, which it's an umbrella group, so some 80 or 90 startups, civic startups with names like Hi from the Other Side or Living Room Conversations. These are groups where left and right are trying to reestablish dialogue. And there is also now a high school program that gets sophomores in high school to get on Google, get to know each other, and then visit each other. Keep politics out, but just you get the north to go south, you get the south to go north, you get the coast to go inland, inland to go coast. So that's a long-term rebuilding of the empathic structure of what was once a well-functioning country. And I think those long-term goals have to be added to our short-term ones. So why don't I stop there, and we can open it out for discussion.
Thank you very much, Hochschild, for your wonderful talk here. And I'm quite, a little bit happy that there's some hope that American politics is not such an empathy as it looks like. And as you say, we have to talk with the people, and maybe we can talk with each other in dialogue. It's a wonderful statement from me at the end of your talk. So I have a few questions, and the first on my list is here, Maria Alexopoulou, Berlin ZFR. Marie, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So you think that, if I understood you right, you said that it's a sense of loss you find in your findings. But is it the economic loss? Is it, or rather, an insignificance that people feel, or even a loss of privilege, a sense of entitlement? I always think about those things because there are also other regions in the global north, in the global south, where people live all the time in poverty, in perpetual poverty, and we haven't such. So I always think this right-wing movements, is it not such a sense of I'm better than this in this sense?
You know, the psychologist Kahneman did some experiments to compare people's response to deprivation with their experience of loss. In other words, you can not have a $10 bill, or you can have a $10 bill and then you lost it. He compared those two situations, and he found that the most distress was not among the absolutely deprived, paradoxically, strangely, but among those who once had it and then lost it. And I think this group of people, the elite of the left behind, this lower middle working class group, feels a multiple loss. They feel a loss of social standing, that they're the kind of person they are is going out of fashion. And that's the first thing they would tell me in an interview. You know, just turn on the tape recorder. Well, you people think that we're stupid, and you think we're ill-educated, and that we're racist, and we're homophobic, and we're fat, and we're sexist. That's what you think. They'll project onto me this and then say, but we're not. And as if there was, I think it's a loss of centrality. It's a demographic loss. It used to be great to be white. And now I hear stories of, these are now in Appalachia, people living in small hollers, and they'll say, "Oh, you white boy," as used as if it were saying, as if it were an epithet, which is new to me. A loss of, I think this is really big, So race is really big, but gender is really big. I think that there is a crisis of manhood that Donald Trump speaks to directly, and no one quite dares name it, and Me Too has the airwaves in the liberal press, but they are, this is a group of men that are facing some bad luck, and Donald Trump both lifts them up. Let me give you the identity of being white. Let me give you the identity of being an American. Those are the two identities you have left, because, you're not much of a worker, and you're on your third marriage, and you're not supporting your kids, and you've done some dope and maybe some prison time. And so he lifts them up, and he gives them others to blame and put down. Those women, those Blacks, those immigrants. And so it's both an uplifting with one hand, and he's a cult figure. He has people see him as a savior, honestly, and he presents himself as that. Look how I've suffered for you. It's almost like Jesus. I'm suffering for you against all these enemies. Believe in me and I will rescue you. So he gives them that uplift, and then it gives them harsh terms with which to annihilate all rivals, and gives them people to hate. So emotionally, I think I understand, given their mental view, given their position in society, what his appeal is. It's serious and it's frightening.
Okay, thank you. So time's a little bit running, so we have time just for short questions and short remarks about this. Sina Arnold is the next.
Yeah, thanks. You already almost gave an answer. I basically wanted to follow up on my colleague Maria's question by pointing out that whereas your central explanation, as I understood it, was economic hardship, I remember in 2016-17, when the rise of Trump was explained, that actually status threat was one of the key components in the empirical studies that were done. And status threat meaning on multiple levels, both economic, but also in the face of the rise and visibility of minorities. And this leads back to the talk by Michel Lamont as well. I would say that, this change of values, the visibility of what Michel Lamont labeled these Generation Z values of progressivism, of liberalism, that is then visible in some aspects of American culture, that this contributes to the sense of status threat. But as I understood from your answer, we're not necessarily in disagreement. But I think that's important also if we want to understand the European case where, the most visible anti-Muslim racists, they're not the poor and downtrodden. These are, intellectuals. These are people that are already in social positions where they perceive a status threat from newly arising minorities that used to have a different position in this society.
Yes. I think you're absolutely right to focus on status threats. And it's interesting. In the absence of security, everything else comes to feel more ephemeral. Who am I? What can I rely on? And I talked to many people in Louisiana who would say, well, Blacks, look how rich they are. They would look at a football, they read about, some rich athlete. What do they have to worry about? Look at me. and look at them, it was almost as if they felt that a reversal had taken place. They had seen African-American news commentators who seemed highly articulate, and well-dressed, and they felt very frumpy. They were between jobs. So that's status. It's not just economic, but many things were crumbling that were a basis of self.
Okay, thank you very much, Arlie Hochschild. I think I will close the list now for it, as we can finish exactly at the time as I have to pretend to do it. So thank you very much for your wonderful talk. We learned a lot about the elite of the left behind and how it differentiates between Kentucky and Louisiana and so much. Thank you very much. And I think now Matthias Miedel's job is to give a farewell.